In a world obsessed with appearances, where we often judge people by their clothes, their jobs, or their circumstances, we miss the most incredible stories hiding in plain sight. What if the person you overlooked today held the power to change everything you thought you knew? What if the quiet janitor pushing a broom through your office every night wasn't just another face in the crowd, but the very person who owned the entire company? This isn't just a tale of hidden identities or surprise revelations. It's about the danger of assumptions and the beauty of redemption. It's about a man who wore the uniform of a janitor but carried the weight of a legacy on his shoulders. While co-workers gossiped behind his back and bosses barely acknowledged his existence, he moved through the office like a ghost, homeless, not hopeless, yet riches in disguise. Think about the last time you felt invisible, the last time someone judged you before taking the time to truly see you. Now imagine carrying that pain every single day while knowing the breathtaking secret that could flip your world upside down. That's the story we're about to explore, a story where the last shall be first and the ignored shall rise. In the heart of the city lies a harsh reality: dirty clothes, sad eyes, and lives forgotten by passers-by. Among the towering buildings, Chloe Murphy scurries, her chestnut hair matted, hiding eyes that have witnessed far too much. No one ever stops to ask why. The tattered clothes, the torn shoes, the smell of sewage. It's all clear evidence that she's homeless, not hopeless, but no one cares. After all, who notices a woman slumped on a park bench, muttering to herself while clutching a piece of paper to her chest? The city dubs her the downtown beggar. Wall Street executives stride past her, avoiding eye contact. Mothers clutch their children closer, whispering, "Don't look at her." But Chloe doesn't need pity. She knows that beneath her rags lies a soul that once ruled empires. Every morning, as the sun rises, she whispers, "Beneath the rags, the true queen among them." The words are soft, but her resolve grows with the wind. The hidden heiress doesn't choose when to shine. Chloe remembers what it was like to be the daughter of magnates, growing up in mansions with crystal windows. Today, her greatest treasure is a faded photo in her wallet, her and her mother, smiling in front of a yacht that now belongs to strangers. Her secret past hurts, but it doesn't break her. The streets have taught her the most valuable lesson: ignored, but not broken. While the world judges her, she guards a secret that could make the proudest of them kneel. Sometimes she watches Jack Voigt, the man in the impeccable suit who always leaves a few bills on Monday mornings. He doesn't know it, but his small gestures are one of the few lights in her chaos. Chloe sighs. Small acts of kindness like these might just be the bridge to an unimaginable future. But she's not ready to reveal who she is, yet. The city treats her like a ghost, but Chloe carries a truth that will make everyone tremble. The crumpled paper she holds, the letter she carried, contains names, dates, and proof of a stolen legacy. From streets to starlight, she thinks. Maybe there's still time. In the meantime, she keeps walking, her feet sore, her heart as hard as granite. It's ironic how everyone sees her as a mistake of life, yet no one realizes she's riches in disguise. The looks of disdain warm her oddly. "They judged her too soon," she murmurs, while counting coins for a cup of hot coffee. The city. We'll learn sooner or later that appearance doesn't define a person's worth. After all, even the most valuable gems start as ordinary pebbles. The cold morning wind brushes Chloe's hair as she watches executives enter the From Beggar to Beauty Enterprises building, the company that once belonged to her family. She smiles bitterly. A life-changing revelation, she thinks. Maybe it's closer than she imagined. Until then, she saves her strength for the day when everything will change, and everyone will regret turning away. Chloe Murphy had become a regular sight on the bustling sidewalks of downtown Manhattan. Passers-by would wrinkle their noses in disgust as they stepped over her, as if she were nothing more than a piece of trash. "Look at that filthy beggar," a woman sneered to her friend. her nose pointed high in the air like a diva who thought herself better than everyone else. Others would roll their eyes and mutter under their breath, "Pathetic," or "What a loser," as if her situation were nothing more than a personal failing. It wasn't just the harsh words that cut deep, it was the way people avoided her, like she was contagious. Businessmen would swerve around her as if she were a plague, their expensive suits pristine and untouched by the reality of the world. Tourists would gasp and grab their purses tighter, as if she might lunge at them and steal their designer accessories. "Move along," security guards would bark, pushing her gently but firmly away from the entrances to gleaming office buildings. The cruelty wasn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it was the subtle things that hurt the most. Like when a mother would pull her child away, whispering, "Don't look at her, honey, she's not like us," as if being homeless made Chloe less human. Or when teenagers would snicker and toss half-eaten food at her, laughing at her misfortune, as if it were all just one big joke. Jack Voigt had seen it all too. From his office window on the 15th floor, he'd watched the daily dance of disdain. He'd seen the way people treated Chloe, the way they judged her too soon, without ever taking the time to wonder how she'd ended up where she was. It made him sick to his stomach. But he was just one man, and there were so many like her out there. What could he really do? The city had a funny way of hardening people's hearts. Everyone was so busy chasing their own dreams, their own success, that they didn't have time for the suffering of others. Compassion was seen as a weakness, something to be avoided if you wanted to climb the ladder of success. But Jack had always believed that true strength lay in seeing the humanity in everyone, no matter how beneath the rags they might seem. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Chloe continued to be the target of the city's cruelty. But through it all, she never lost sight of who she truly was. She carried her dignity close to her chest, like a precious jewel hidden beneath layers of grime and dirt. Because she knew that one day, the tables would turn. One day, those who had mocked her would have to eat their words. Amidst the sea of cruelty and indifference, Chloe Murphy found solace in the memories that no one could ever take away from her. She would often sit by the East River, the gentle breeze tousling her matted hair as she journeyed back in time. Memories of her childhood flooded her mind. Her father's warm laughter echoing through the grand halls of their mansion, her mother's delicate hands teaching her how to waltz, and the opulent Christmas parties where she danced with suitors from around the world. Those memories were like precious gems, hidden deep within her soul, a constant reminder of who she truly was. No matter how harsh the present became, those recollections gave her the strength to keep going. There were days when the cold would pierce her to the bone, or hunger would gnaw at her relentless, making it hard to even lift her head. But then she'd close her eyes and remember the feel of silk sheets beneath her, the taste of gourmet meals prepared by world-class chefs, and the sound of her family's applause as she delivered a speech at one of their charitable events. "I am the woman they looked down on, but I won't stay this way forever," she'd whisper to herself, her voice barely audible over the city's constant hum. Chloe had learned to guard those memories fiercely. She knew that if she let the cruelty of the world rob her of them, she'd have nothing left. So she'd retreat into her mind, where the past was still vibrant and full of color. There, she could feel the embrace of her late mother, hear her father's encouraging words, and remember the weight of the family heirloom necklace, a symbol of her true identity that she'd hidden years ago before her fall from grace. The quiet strength that emanated from within her was a puzzle to the few who bothered to notice. Jack Voigt, with his sharp eyes and compassionate heart, had seen it. He'd seen the way her posture straightened ever so slightly when she thought. No one was looking, the way her eyes would light up for a brief moment when she talked to herself, and the determination that flickered in her gaze even when she was at her weakest. He knew there was more to her than met the eye, more than the homeless, not hopeless exterior that the city had so carelessly labeled her with. And as the seasons changed and the city continued its relentless march forward, Chloe's quiet strength became her armor. It shielded her from the harsh words, the disdainful looks, and the countless rejections she faced daily. She'd seen the best and the worst of life, and that unique perspective had forged her into someone unbreakable. The woman who had once been riches in disguise was now a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the question lingered, in the air, like a whisper waiting to be heard. How long would it be before the world caught a glimpse of the strength that had been hiding in plain sight? And when it did, would it be too late for those who had judged her too soon to make amends? Despite the crushing weight of her circumstances, Chloe Murphy hadn't lost her capacity for compassion. On cold winter mornings, when the frost bit at her fingers, she'd share the meager food she'd scrounged with the stray dogs that wandered the alleyways. "Here, boy," she'd whisper, breaking off a piece of stale bread and offering it to a scrawny mutt with haunted eyes. The dog would gulp it down gratefully, and for a moment, in that simple act, Chloe felt a flicker of connection. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small rebellion against the they-judged-her-too-soon mentality that defined her existence. One afternoon, as rain poured down in relentless sheets, she spotted an elderly woman struggling with an umbrella that had turned inside out. Without a second thought, Chloe rushed over, her tattered jacket soaked through in seconds. "Let me help you with that," she said, her voice gentle but firm. The woman looked startled, then relieved, as Chloe wrestled the umbrella back into submission. "Thank you, dear," the stranger said, her eyes welling with unexpected tears. Chloe smiled faintly. "We all need a hand sometimes," she replied, before melting back into the crowd. Jack Voigt had witnessed these moments from afar. He'd seen her give away her last dollar to a hungry teenager, her face pale but resolute. He'd seen her sit with a trembling old man on the park bench, listening patiently as the man babbled about his deceased wife. "Small acts of kindness are the threads that hold humanity together," Jack mused to himself one evening, the image of Chloe's selfless gestures replaying in his mind. But he was just an observer, a man with his own demons and regrets. Chloe's From Streets to Starlight journey was paved with these tiny, almost invisible moments of generosity. One day, she found a lost wallet stuffed with cash and identification. Instead of pocketing the money, a temptation that screamed in her ear, she waited for hours outside the address on the driver's license, shivering but steadfast. When the owner, a frantic college student, finally appeared, Chloe handed it back without a word. The student's relief turned to embarrassment. "Why did you do that?" he stammered. Chloe just shrugged. "Because someone once did the same for me," she lied, the truth buried deep like a time capsule. The homeless shelter down the street became a second home for Chloe. Every Tuesday evening, she'd volunteer, helping serve dinner to the endless line of weary faces. The workers there knew her by name, respected her quiet dedication. "You're a saint, Chloe," the manager once said, but Chloe just laughed. "Saints don't exist in this neighborhood," she quipped, yet the kids at the shelter adored her. They'd cluster around her as she read bedtime stories, her voice taking on dramatic tones that made the heroes brave and the villains gloriously wicked. For those children, in that flickering light of the shelter's common room, Chloe wasn't a beggar. She was a hero. Her secret past occasionally surfaced in these moments. She'd catch herself using the same graceful table manners her mother had drilled into her as a child, or quoting Latin phrases from her elite school days to the amusement of the shelter's cats. Those small glimpses of her former life were like riches in disguise, hidden in plain sight. The other volunteers never guessed that the woman scrubbing dishes had once hosted charity galas where the silverware was more expensive than their cars. But the most profound act of kindness was the one she performed on herself. Every night, before sleep claimed her in the damp confines of her cardboard box, Chloe would write in a battered notebook. She'd list the good things that had happened. That day, a kind word from a stranger, a beautiful sunset over the river, the taste of fresh berries someone had shared. Gratitude is the bridge between suffering and peace, she'd write, her handwriting shaky but determined. And in that simple ritual, she found a strength that even the coldest streets couldn't touch. One rainy Tuesday evening, as the city streets glistened under the glow of streetlights, Jack Voigt found himself caught in a sudden downpour. He'd just left a late meeting at From Beggar to Beauty Enterprises, his mind still swirling with spreadsheets and merger talks. Cursing his forgotten umbrella, he ducked into the shadow of a nearby awning, hoping the storm would pass quickly. That's when he saw her, Chloe Murphy, sitting on the curb, her back against the cold stone wall of an office building. She was shivering, her thin jacket offering little protection against the relentless rain. But instead of blending into the night, she stood out, like a beacon of resilience in a sea of despair. Jack had seen her around the neighborhood before. Of course, who hadn't? But tonight was different. Tonight, he couldn't look away. He watched as she pulled a tattered blanket tighter around her shoulders, her movements slow but deliberate. A nearby puddle reflected her face, pale, gaunt, but with eyes that sparked like embers. Jack felt a strange pull, a curiosity he couldn't ignore. Was it her quiet dignity? The way she carried herself, as if she were waiting for something? Or maybe it was the stark contrast between her beneath the rags appearance and the unspoken strength in her posture. Before he could talk himself out of it, Jack stepped out of the awning and walked over. The rain soaked his expensive suit, but he didn't care. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Chloe glanced up, surprise flickering across her features. For a moment, she said nothing, just studied him with those piercing eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded. "The curb's free," she quipped, a hint of humor breaking through the tension. They talked for hours, or at least Jack talked, and Chloe listened with the kind of attentiveness that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. He told her about his job, the stress, the empty victories. She shared little about herself, but her insights were sharp, her words laced with a wisdom that seemed out of place on someone the world had written off as homeless, not hopeless. As the rain finally slowed to a drizzle, Jack realized he'd missed his last train home. But he didn't regret a moment of it. "You're different from what people see," he said quietly, standing up and offering a hand. Chloe looked at his hand for a beat, then took it, her grip surprisingly steady. "People see what they want to see," she replied, her voice soft but unwavering. Jack walked away that night with the weight of unanswered questions hanging over him. Who was she really? And why did he feel compelled to find out? In the quiet moments between rain showers, when the world seemed to pause, Chloe Murphy would pull out the weathered envelope from her jacket pocket. Its edges were frayed, the paper thin and yellowed with age, but it was the most precious thing she owned. She'd run her fingers over the elegant script on the front, her late mother's handwriting, a relic from a time when her world was still intact. The letter was addressed to her simply, "Chloe, my dearest daughter, read this when you're ready to remember who you are." She'd found it tucked inside the lining of an old coat she'd been wearing the night she'd fled her family's mansion, a coat she'd kept close even as everything else had been stripped away. The night had been chaotic, filled with whispered accusations, shattered glass, and her father's thunderous roar as he'd discovered the truth about her mother's secret accounts. "It's a forgery!" he'd bellowed, but the look in his eyes had told Chloe otherwise. The letter had become her anchor in the chaos. Some nights, when despair threatened to swallow her whole, she'd retreat to the abandoned warehouse where she slept and read it by the dim light of a stolen flashlight. Her mother's words were like a balm to her wounded soul. "My love, the world may have turned its back on you, but remember this. You are a daughter of the Murphy legacy. What they've taken from you is not yours by grace, but by right. And that right is documented, hidden where greedy hands cannot reach it." Chloe had memorized every line, every nuance of her mother's voice that bled through the words. The letter spoke of a trust fund, established long before Chloe's birth, tucked away in a Swiss bank account under a pseudonym only her mother and Chloe knew. It detailed the betrayal that had driven them to such measures, the scheming uncle, who'd wormed his way into their family's trust, the forged documents that had made it look like Chloe's parents had squandered their fortune. But the letter wasn't just about money, it was about identity. "You are not the girl they've made you," it insisted. "You are the hidden heiress, and one day you'll reclaim what's yours." Those words had become a mantra, a whispered promise in the darkest hours. Jack Voigt had noticed her holding onto the letter. He'd seen the way her fingers would tighten around it when she thought no one was looking, the way her eyes would grow distant as she read and reread its contents. It was a small detail, but it told him everything he needed to know. This woman was waiting for something, or someone. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Chloe kept the letter close. It was her shield against the they. Judged her too soon mentality of the city. It was the bridge between her past and her future. And somewhere, deep in the labyrinth of her mind, she knew that one day she'd have to act on its promises. Every night, as the city slept, Chloe, Murphy would retreat to the one place that felt like her own, a tiny hidden alcove beneath the subway overpass. There, surrounded by the constant rumble of passing trains, she would carefully unfold the crumpled newspaper clippings she had collected over the years. Each one told a story of a family that had once been the epitome of success and wealth. The Murphys had been a name synonymous with power and influence, their faces gracing the covers of magazines and their achievements celebrated in headlines. But then it all changed. The headlines turned from admiration to scandal. Murphy. Family empire crumbles after decades of fraud, one read. Daughter disappears amidst bankruptcy and betrayal, another declared. The public had devoured the story with morbid fascination, never suspecting that the girl in the photographs, once dressed in designer gowns and pearl necklaces, was the same woman now huddled in the shadows, her identity buried beneath layers of dirt and despair. Chloe knew the truth, though. She knew that the articles only told half the story. Her father's fraud had been a meticulously orchestrated lie, cooked up by her Uncle Evelyn, who had always been jealous of her parents' success. The man who now lived in their mansion, who drove their cars and spent their money, was the very person who had engineered their downfall. And she, the true heir, had been cast out like yesterday's news. There were moments when the weight of her secret threatened to crush her. When the cold seeped into her bones and the hunger gnawed at her stomach, she would wonder if it was worth it, holding on to this truth that no one else knew. But then she would remember the feel of her mother's embrace, the sound of her father's voice telling her she was loved, and she would steel herself. "I am not a beggar," she would whisper into the darkness. "I am the daughter of Richard and Eleanor Murphy, and I will not be forgotten." Jack Voigt, with his keen eyes and compassionate heart, had begun to piece together the puzzle. He had seen the way Chloe's hands would tremble when she thought no one was looking, the way her gaze would drift to the mansion on the hill that had once been hers. He had even done a little digging of his own, uncovering the old news stories and the rumors that had swirled around the Murphy family's demise. It didn't take a genius to see that there was more to Chloe than met the eye. But the question remained, how long could she keep hiding? How long before the truth that she was once a daughter of unimaginable wealth, lost by betrayal, would burst forth and change everything? And when it did, would the world be ready to see her for who she truly was? The Murphy family had been a pillar of New York's elite for generations, their name synonymous with success and philanthropy. But behind the veneer of perfection lay a web of secrets and lies that would ultimately lead to their downfall. It began with a whisper, a rumor that Chloe's father had been siphoning funds from a major charity tied to the family's image. The accusation came from none other than her Uncle Evelyn, the man who had always worn a smile just a shade too wide, his kindness just a beat too calculated. At first, Chloe's parents had laughed it off. "Evelyn's always been jealous," her father had said, pouring himself a glass of scotch as he leaned against the mahogany desk in his study. "He'll grow tired of his games soon enough." But Evelyn's whispers turned into screams, his accusations growing bolder and more detailed. He produced documents, forged, as it turned out later, but by then, the damage was done. Chloe remembers the night it all fell apart like a scar, seared into her memory. Her parents had hosted a grand gala at their Manhattan mansion, the culmination of months of planning for a new charity wing. Guests arrived in their finest attire, champagne flowed like water, and the orchestra played a waltz that Chloe would later realize was the last dance of her old life. Midway through the evening, Evelyn stood up, his glass clinking against the rim as he demanded attention. "I can't stand by while this family's legacy is destroyed by greed," he'd announced, his voice dripping with feigned sorrow. The room had fallen silent, the music dying on the lips of the musicians. Within days, the media had a field day. Headlines screamed of betrayal, fraud, and the fall of a dynasty. Chloe's father was arrested on charges of embezzlement. Her mother collapsed into a state of grief that bordered on catatonia. The family's assets were frozen, their mansion seized, their loved ones turned into enemies overnight. And through it all, Evelyn stood in the shadows, pulling strings and offering condolences that reeked of satisfaction. Chloe had been the last to know. Her parents had shielded her from the truth for as long as they could, but on the morning her father was taken away in handcuffs, she'd found the letters, stacks of them, hidden in a drawer in her mother's dressing room. Each one detailed Evelyn's schemes, his careful orchestration of lies to dismantle the family he'd claimed to love. "He wanted it all," her mother had whispered through broken sobs. "He always wanted what we had." Now, as Chloe sat on the cold, damp ground of the subway overpass, she clutched those letters to her chest. They were her only proof, the key to unraveling the betrayal that took everything. But proof meant nothing when you were homeless, not hopeless, when the world had already written your obituary. Or so she thought. Jack Voigt, who had been quietly observing her from afar, had begun to notice patterns in Chloe's behavior. He'd seen her visit the old Murphy mansion on the outskirts of the city, her eyes scanning the windows as if searching for ghosts. He'd seen her pore over legal documents in the public library, her brow furrowed in concentration. And he'd seen the moment her shoulders slumped in despair when an article about Evelyn's latest generous donation to the very charity he'd destroyed the Murphys over hit the stands. The path to justice was never straightforward, especially when your enemies held all the cards. But Chloe wasn't just any woman. She was the hidden heiress, and hidden heirs had a way of emerging when least expected. After months of living in the shadows, Chloe Murphy's world began to shift in the most unexpected way. It started with a simple phone call, one that would spark a chain of events that even she couldn't have anticipated. The caller introduced himself as Daniel Reed, a lawyer with a reputation for taking on impossible cases. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much but still believed in the good. "Ms. Murphy," he began, the formality of his tone cutting through the noise of the city. "I've been searching for you for quite some time. I believe I have information that pertains to your family's estate." Chloe froze, her heart pounding in her chest. No one had used her real name in years, not since the scandal. "Who are you?" she whispered, fear mixing with a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Daniel explained that he had been a longtime friend of her late mother and had been quietly gathering evidence to dismantle Evelyn's lies. "Your uncle made one critical mistake," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "He believed everyone was as easily bought as he was. But your mother had allies, people who saw the truth and preserved it." He told her about a safe deposit box in Zurich, one that contained documents proving her father's innocence and detailing Evelyn's elaborate schemes. "But there's more," Daniel continued. "Your mother transferred a significant portion of the family's assets to a trust fund in your name before everything fell apart. It's been growing untouched all these years. The call ended with a promise, a meeting at Daniel's modest but respectable law office downtown. As Chloe hung up, her hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. For the first time since her fall from grace, she felt a spark ignite within her. This could be the life-changing revelation she had been waiting for. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Daniel had warned her that Evelyn had powerful friends in high places, people who would stop at nothing to keep her in the shadows. "They'll try to discredit you," he had said, his eyes locking with hers during their first face-to-face meeting. "They'll dig up every skeletons in your closet and invent new ones if they have to. But we have the truth on our side." Chloe knew what she had to do. She would have to leave behind the anonymity that had been her shield and step into the spotlight, exposing herself to the same people who had once scorned her. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. Daniel and a small team of dedicated individuals, one of whom was Jack Voigt, who had unexpectedly volunteered his expertise in corporate law, stood ready to support her. The journey would be fraught with challenges. There would be late nights poring over legal documents, tense meetings with hesitant witnesses, and moments of doubt where she'd wonder if it was all worth it. Yet with each step forward, the spark of hope grew stronger. And in the quiet moments when the city slept and the weight of the world seemed lighter, she'd smile to herself. The tables were about to turn. As Chloe Murphy prepared to step back into the world she'd been torn from, she knew her journey would be met with resistance. Evelyn Murphy, now the self-proclaimed patriarch of the family and enjoying the luxuries he'd stolen, had spent years weaving a tapestry of lies to keep his deeds hidden. He'd bought off journalists, intimidated witnesses, and even arranged for key evidence against him to mysteriously disappear. His power was vast, his influence deep, and he had no intention of relinquishing either. The first sign of trouble came when Daniel Reed's office was broken into just days after Chloe's initial visit. Files were scattered across the floor, some documents burned beyond recognition. "They're sending a message," Daniel said. His jaw clenched as he surveyed the damage. "But we have copies, safe and sound." Then there were the anonymous threats, phone calls in the dead of night, voices hissing warnings, texts filled with veiled threats. "Back off before you end up like your parents," one read, the words dripping with malice. Jack Voigt, who had become an unexpected ally, stepped up his efforts. He installed security systems in Daniel's office, hired private guards for Chloe, and worked around the clock to anticipate the next move from Evelyn's camp. Evelyn's reach extended further than they'd imagined. During a court hearing to regain access to family records, Chloe faced a panel of judges who seemed predisposed against her. "Evidence?" one sneered, his ties to Evelyn's legal team. Later exposed. "You have no evidence, Miss Murphy. Just the ramblings of a disgraced family." But Evelyn's greatest weapon was the public's willingness to believe the narrative he'd crafted. The city had been quick to turn on the Murphys during the scandal, painting them as villains deserving of their fate. Why would they now side with a woman who'd been living on the streets for years? "They judged her too soon," Jack muttered, during a late-night strategy session. "But we can make them see the truth." The team uncovered a pattern of corruption, a web that connected Evelyn to several influential figures in the city. There were bribes, covert agreements, and a series of shell companies designed to launder the stolen Murphy fortune. Each discovery was a piece of the puzzle, but exposing it would require more than just evidence. It would require courage. Chloe's resolve was tested daily. There were moments when the weight of it all threatened to consume her, when the sleepless nights and the constant fear made her question if it was worth it. But then she'd remember the feeling of her mother's hands on her shoulders, the sound of her father's laughter, and the knowledge that she was fighting not just for herself, but for the legacy that had been unjustly taken. The path forward was fraught with danger. Yet, in the face of adversity, Chloe discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She was no longer the girl who'd been cast out. She was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stand in her way. The turning point came on a blustery Monday morning when Chloe Murphy stood at the window of Daniel Reed's law office, staring out at the city that had spit her out years ago. The view was familiar yet foreign, a skyline she once ruled from, the penthouse suites of her family's empire, now seen through the eyes of someone who'd slept in parks and begged for scraps. "This is it," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "No more hiding, no more running." Jack Voigt stood behind her, his presence a silent anchor in the storm of emotions swirling around her. He'd become an unexpected ally, someone who saw beyond the dirt and despair to the woman who'd once been the hidden heiress. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and admiration. Chloe turned, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, though inside, her heart raced like a trapped animal. The plan was simple in theory, but razor-edged in practice. Daniel had arranged a press conference outside the old Murphy mansion, a place that had become a symbol of greed and downfall. Chloe would stand before the cameras, reveal her true identity, and present the evidence that would dismantle Evelyn's carefully constructed empire. "They'll try to tear you down," Daniel warned during a rehearsal. "They'll question your sanity, your motives, everything." Chloe just nodded. She'd expected nothing less. What drove her wasn't just the desire for justice or the longing to reclaim her birthright. It was the memory of her mother's final words whispered in the hospital bed. "Don't let them win, Chloe. Don't let them turn us into ghosts." Those words were a fire in her veins, pushing her forward even when doubt tried to pull her back. The night before the press conference, sleep evaded her. She paced the small apartment Daniel had secured for her, her mind racing through every possible scenario. What if the evidence wasn't enough? What if the public refused to believe her? What if she became just another footnote in the city's endless saga of rise and fall? Jack, sensing her turmoil, brought her a cup of tea. Strong and bitter, just how she liked it. "You've got this," he said, his usual sharp demeanor softened by rare gentleness. "The world needs to see who you really are." When the morning came, Chloe dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the tattered clothes that had been her uniform for years. As she stepped outside, the cold air bit at her skin, but she felt oddly alive. The mansion loomed ahead, its once grand facade weathered but still imposing. Reporters had already gathered, their cameras flashing like fireflies in the dawn light. Evelyn stood among them, his smile faltering as he caught sight of her. Taking a deep breath, Chloe climbed the steps, her heels clicking a steady rhythm against the stone. This was her moment, the moment she'd dreamed of and feared in equal measure. No more hiding, no more fear. It was time to rise. The press conference began with a hush. Chloe Murphy stood at the podium, the mansion's grand pillars rising behind her like sentinels of a forgotten era. The air was thick with anticipation, the cameras flashing in a staccato rhythm that matched the drum of her heart. She glanced at Jack Voigt, who stood to her side, his expression a mask of calm despite the storm in his eyes. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady but carrying the weight of years. "I am here to reveal the truth, a truth that has been buried for far too long." The crowd murmured, some leaning forward with predatory interest, others shifting uneasily as if sensing the ground beneath their assumptions was about to give way. Evelyn Murphy, standing slightly apart from the journalists, stiffened. His smile had long faded, replaced by a calculated neutrality that didn't reach his eyes. Chloe reached into the tote bag at her feet and withdrew a folder, its edges sharp and new. This was the moment she'd rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times, the climax of a story she'd been forced to live rather than read. "Evidence," she said simply, holding up the first document, a meticulously detailed account of her uncle's financial transactions. The figures danced in the light, damning in their precision. Daniel Reed stepped forward then, his presence a reassuring, counterpoint to Chloe's quiet intensity. "What you're seeing is just the beginning," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent years in the trenches of legal warfare. He produced more documents, each one a piece of a puzzle that painted Evelyn as the architect of deceit. Bank statements, witness testimonies, even recordings of hushed conversations that left little to the imagination. The journalists began to stir, their initial skepticism melting into feverish activity. Pens scribbled furiously. Recorders captured every word, and cameras zoomed in on Evelyn's face, a face that was beginning to drain of color. "This is absurd!" Evelyn finally spat, his composure fracturing. "These are fabrications, slanders against a respected member of the community." Chloe's response was measured, her tone carrying a sorrow that transcended anger. "Respected?" she echoed, the word sharp as a blade. "The man who stole from his own family, who destroyed lives to feed his greed." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "This isn't about restoring my family's name, though that matters. It's about justice, about unmasking the truth that's been hidden in plain sight." Jack watched from the corner of his eye as the crowd's mood shifted. What had begun as a spectacle was transforming into something more visceral, a reckoning. He saw the moment when several reporters exchanged glances, when the Tongyida narrative Evelyn had cultivated began to splinter. And in that moment, he felt a flicker of pride, not for himself, but for the woman who stood unwavering at the podium. The evidence unfolded like a tapestry, each thread reinforcing the picture of Evelyn's betrayal. There were gasps as photographs were displayed. Evelyn meeting with offshore account managers, Evelyn signing documents that siphoned the family's wealth. And then, the final revelation, the legal documentation proving Chloe's claim to the trust fund her mother had established, the very fund that had been obscured by her uncle's machinations. When Chloe finally stepped back from the podium, the silence was profound. The cameras continued to flash, but the questions now were different. Less about scandal and more about accountability. Evelyn stood rooted to the spot, his facade crumbling beneath the weight of exposure. For Chloe, it was a victory, but one tinged with melancholy. The fight wasn't over. There would be appeals, there would be attempts to discredit her, and there would be nights when doubt crept in. But for the first time in years, she felt the balance shift. The truth, once buried, had broken the surface, and there was no going back. The aftermath of the press conference was a whirlwind of chaos and revelation. As the crowd dispersed, the faces of those who had once sneered at Chloe Murphy were frozen in shock. Reporters who had previously written her off as another desperate face on the streets now scrambled to be the first to interview her. The public, hungry for drama, devoured the story with a ferocity that left Chloe both exhausted and exhilarated. Evelyn Murphy's reaction was a study in collapse. His veneer of respectability cracked under the relentless barrage of evidence. At first, he'd tried to fight back, issuing statements through his lawyers, attempting to discredit Daniel and his team. But the tide had turned. Witnesses who had once feared him now came forward, their testimonies painting a picture of a man who had built his fortune on the backs of others. Jack Voigt found himself in the peculiar position of being both a protector and a strategist. He fielded calls from media outlets, negotiated with lawyers, and even shielded Chloe from overeager fans who wanted a piece of the rags to riches story. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of quiet triumph. Like when an old business associate of Chloe's father approached them at a courthouse, tears in his eyes, offering an apology and a promise to testify against Evelyn. The most unexpected reaction came from the general public. Strangers approached Chloe on the street, not with pity, but with admiration. A taxi driver, who had once refused to pick her up because of her appearance, now insisted on giving her a free ride. "You showed them," he said with a grin. "You really showed them." But not all reactions were positive. There were those who refused to believe the truth, clinging to the narrative that the Murphys had been corrupt from the start. Online comment sections filled with vitriol, some calling Chloe a gold digger, others claiming the whole thing was a publicity stunt. "They judged her too soon," Jack muttered one evening as they reviewed the comments over coffee. But the truth has a way of sticking. Chloe's response to the criticism was both humble and defiant. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she told a reporter during a rare, candid interview. "I'm asking for accountability, for the truth to be acknowledged." As the days passed, Evelyn's empire began to crumble. His business partners distanced themselves. His carefully curated social connections fell away, and the media that had once celebrated him now feasted on his downfall. There were rumors of a nervous breakdown, of late-night drinking, of whispered phone calls to contacts who had long since abandoned him. Chloe felt a pang of regret. Not for him, but for the family they'd once been. She remembered the holidays. At the mansion, the sound of her parents' laughter, the warmth of a life that had been stolen. Yet, amidst the regret, there was resolve. This was not just about reclaiming wealth, it was about restoring justice. And as the city began to whisper, a new name, the true queen among them, Chloe prepared for the next phase of her journey. The fight was far from over, but for the first time she felt the wind at her back. The days following the press conference were a blur of activity for Chloe Murphy. With the truth finally out in the open, she began the arduous process of reclaiming what was rightfully hers. It wasn't as simple as signing a few documents or making a grand entrance into high society. No, taking back her power required strategy, patience, and an unwavering belief in justice. The first step was legal. Daniel Reed and his team worked tirelessly to navigate the complex web of lawsuits and injunctions Evelyn threw their way. Every day brought a new battle, a motion to delay, a request for more evidence, a smear campaign targeting Chloe's character. But with each challenge, Chloe grew stronger, her resolve hardening like steel under pressure. Jack Voigt became her anchor in the storm. His knowledge of corporate law proved invaluable as they navigated the murky waters of Evelyn's business dealings. Together, they uncovered hidden assets, frozen accounts, and secret agreements that had kept the stolen Murphy fortune out of reach for years. "This isn't just about money," Jack reminded her during a late-night session in Daniel's office. "It's about rebuilding your legacy, from beggar to beauty." Chloe also focused on rebuilding her public image. Gone were the days when she'd shrink from attention. Now she stepped into the spotlight with purpose. She granted interviews to select journalists, sharing her story not as a victim, but as a survivor. "I'm not here to ask for pity," she told one reporter. "I'm here to ask for accountability, for the truth to be acknowledged, and for those who've suffered because of my family's downfall to be made whole." The public response was overwhelming. Strangers approached her with tears in their eyes, sharing how her courage inspired them to face their own battles. A single mother who'd once been evicted from her apartment after the Murphy family's charity stopped funding her housing program, hugged Chloe tightly. "You're giving me back my hope," she whispered. But not everyone was on her side. Evelyn's allies in high places launched a counter-offensive, questioning the validity of the evidence and painting Chloe as a gold digger. Online forums buzzed with divided opinions, some praising her resilience, others dismissing her as another opportunist. "They judged her too soon," Jack muttered during one particularly brutal news cycle. But Chloe refused to let the negativity derail her. She also knew that taking back her power meant more than just reclaiming wealth. It meant restoring the family's reputation and using their resources to help others. Inspired by her mother's philanthropic spirit, Chloe announced plans to revive the Murphy Family Foundation, this time with a focus on aiding the homeless and fighting against corruption. "We'll use our legacy to create real change," she declared during a town hall meeting attended by community leaders and former employees of the family business. The journey was far from over. There would be setbacks, late nights, and moments of doubt. But with every step forward, Chloe felt the weight of her past lifting. She was no longer just the hidden heiress. She was a force for justice, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the power of truth. As Chloe Murphy stood at the grand reopening of the Murphy Family Foundation headquarters, she felt a profound sense of closure and new beginnings. The once abandoned building had been transformed into a beacon of hope, its windows gleaming under the morning sun. Inside, the walls were adorned with artwork created by emerging artists from underprivileged backgrounds, a nod to the Foundation's new mission of supporting the arts and education for the homeless. The journey to this moment had been nothing short of extraordinary. After successfully reclaiming a significant portion of her family's fortune and exposing Evelyn's corruption, Chloe had faced the daunting task of rebuilding the Murphy legacy. But she was determined that this time, the legacy would be rooted in integrity and compassion rather than just wealth and power. The Foundation's new initiatives were a testament to Chloe's vision. There were scholarships for students from low-income families, funding for community art projects, and partnerships with local shelters to provide not just housing, but also job training and mental health resources. "We're not just giving handouts," Chloe explained during a board meeting. "We're empowering people to build better lives for themselves." Jack Voigt, now a trusted advisor and close friend, watched with pride as Chloe navigated the complexities of philanthropy. He'd been skeptical at first, another rich kid playing at redemption. But her unwavering dedication had won him over. "You're rewriting the script," he said one evening as they reviewed grant applications by the light of his office lamp. "And it's a hell of a story." The public's response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from strangers who'd been inspired by Chloe's journey. Volunteers flocked to the Foundation's events, eager to be part of something meaningful. Even some of Evelyn's former associates, now seeking to distance themselves from his scandals, contributed funds and expertise. But Chloe remained cautious. She knew that true change required more than just money. It required a shift in mindset. She also faced criticism. Some accused her of attempting to whitewash her family's past sins. Others claimed her efforts were mere performative activism. "From streets to starlight, what a fairy tale," scoffed a commentator on a popular news channel. But Chloe refused to let the naysayers derail her mission. "We can't change the past," she acknowledged in a televised interview, "but we can shape the future." One of the Foundation's most impactful programs was the Second Chances initiative, designed to help individuals transitioning out of homelessness. Chloe drew from her own experiences to design the curriculum, ensuring it addressed not just practical needs, but also emotional and psychological challenges. "It's not enough to give someone a place to live," she told a group of prospective donors. "You have to give them a reason to stay." The program's first graduate was Maria, a single mother who'd spent years bouncing between shelters after a series of unfortunate events. With the Foundation's support, Maria secured stable housing, completed a nursing certification, and found a job at a local clinic. At the graduation ceremony, she tearfully thanked Chloe. "You gave me back my dignity," she said. Chloe hugged her tightly. "We're rewriting legacies together," she whispered back. As the Foundation's influence grew, so did Chloe's reputation. She was invited to speak at conferences, write op-eds, and even testify before legislative bodies on issues of poverty and social justice. Her voice, once silenced by circumstance, now carried weight and authority. And through it all, she remained grounded, often returning to the subway overpass where she'd once found shelter to remind herself of where she'd been and how far she'd come. Chloe Murphy's transformation was complete. The woman who had once been spat upon and ignored now commanded rooms with a presence that demanded attention. Her speeches at global conferences on poverty and corruption drew standing ovations. When she walked into a space, heads turned, not out of recognition of her wealth, but out of respect for her resilience. The business world, which had once rejected her, now sought her counsel. Chloe had launched a new venture, from beggar to Beauty Enterprises, a company dedicated to ethical business practices and social responsibility. It became a flagship in the corporate world, its success built not on exploitation, but on innovation and compassion. Jack Voigt, now her business partner, often joked that he'd finally found a boss who outworked him. Her relationship with the media had evolved too. Gone were the days of sensationalist headlines. Journalists now sought her views on policy, social change, and leadership. She became a columnist for a major newspaper, her op-eds challenging readers to question their assumptions and fight for a more just world. The moment she stunned them all became a refrain in the public consciousness, a reminder of how perceptions can shift. Chloe's influence extended beyond boardrooms and newsrooms. She mentored young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, hosting workshops in the very parks where she had once slept. "You are not defined by your circumstances," she'd tell them, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. Her story inspired countless individuals to pursue their dreams despite the odds. The Murphy family name, once a byword for scandal, became synonymous with redemption. Chloe's parents, though gone, would have been proud. She restored the family mansion not as a symbol of wealth, but as a community center offering resources to those in need. The gardens, once closed to the public, now hosted free concerts and farmers' markets, their beauty accessible to all. Evelyn Murphy's fate served as a stark contrast. His businesses collapsed, his reputation in tatters. In the end, he faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of greed. But Chloe rarely thought of him. Her focus was on the future, on the lives she could touch, the changes she could enact. The final chapter of Chloe's journey was one of empowerment. She had proven that legacy isn't just about inheritance, it's about impact. And her impact was felt in every life she'd touched, every law she'd influenced, every heart she'd inspired. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a force of nature, rewriting the rules of a world that had once tried to bury her. And so, the journey of Chloe Murphy, a woman once invisible, once spat upon, and once broken, comes full circle. From the shadows of the streets to the spotlight of redemption, her story teaches us that legacy is not just about inheritance, but about the impact we leave on the world and the lives we touch along the way. She is no longer the woman they look down on, but the true queen among them, a symbol of resilience and hope. As we draw the curtain on her remarkable transformation, we're left with a powerful question. How many Chloes walk among us today, unnoticed and underestimated? The next time you encounter someone who seems beneath your notice, pause. Take a moment to see beyond the uniform, beyond the circumstances, and into the humanity that lies beneath. Did this story leave you inspired, outraged? Did it make you reflect on your own assumptions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about a time you were judged too soon or a moment when you realized you'd overlooked someone's true worth. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and power, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you're eager for more stories that challenge perceptions and uplift the human spirit, hit that subscribe button. The world is full of hidden queens and kings, and their stories are waiting to be told.